markets don't close deals, companies don't close deals, sales agents do. Let me explain. We are often so obsessed with just driving sales results, and we want to see month-over-month growth. We want to see increases. We want to see success. The problem, though, is that we often treat the sales organization in a very superficial manner. So we look really at the highest possible level and say, here's my sales target for the month, and here's the actual sales. We are only at 60%. Push harder. No more weekends, no more public holidays. If necessary, give them more money. If they close deals, we need to hit those targets. That's often how companies end up managing their sales teams. And it turns on to emotions, into pressure, into maybe we need to train them a bit better. They need to have a better pitch, and that will change everything. Or they just need to be managed with more discipline, with more toughness, and then they will produce the results that we want to see. Now, obviously, there can be some merit to a small extent to some of those approaches, but it completely misses the bigger picture. Sales results are created on the sales agent level. They're created in the conversations that are taking place between potential customers and sales agents. They are created in the first impression that a potential customer gets when they see the advertisement, when they sign up on a landing page, when they download the app, when they create an account. That's where the sale is being made or not. And so we need to look at sales performance in a more structural way, especially in high volume B2C companies, where the sales or the revenue is not being made by sitting with people for dinners and taking them out for like 6 months in a row, which sometimes enterprise sellers have to do, and how they make deals with big companies and decision makers. Especially in B2C high volume, you need to work through structure, and you need to work through the system itself. And what does that mean in practice? As we said before, it's very easy to look at sales targets, actual achievement, and we have a problem. And if you want to take it a notch deeper, and we really want to look at the sales agent level, we actually want to look at things like what is the average order value or average basket size, which means out of all the products that I'm selling that have certain price points, maybe I have one product for $100, I have another product for $1,000. What are they typically selling? Are they selling more of the cheaper products because maybe you give them sales bonuses based on how many customers they get? Or do they sell products more on the high end? Like, do you have an average order value of $800? Surely means you give them the incentives and sales commission based on the revenue that they're bringing in. So that can already tell you something about how confident are people to actually, sales people actually to pitch higher end products across your product portfolio. Of course, if you only have one product to sell, then there's not much to that number. But in most cases, there is a possibility that sales agents who are more skilled will be able to sell higher ticket items or upsells, additional sales in the same transaction. So average order value is one of those levers that I want to look at first. We have 4 in total. The second one is conversion rate. In the conversion rate, I want to look at how many leads, of course, do the sales agents get, and how many of them do become customers. Now, what is the definition of lead? This is where it gets a bit tricky. Sometimes if the marketing department is incentivized to create large lead volumes, next month we have to see 12,000 leads, then what do? They obviously incentivize quantity over quality. So you will necessarily end up with a lot of leads that are completely unqualified entering the sales pipeline. And these could be people who had signed up being completely misled about what the product actually is. They signed up because something on the advertisement said free restaurant vouchers if you click here. And then you're actually trying to sell an accounting software. So the messaging and this is not just an extreme, but in many ways it's very illustrative of what is happening when marketing teams are incentivized for lead volume. In many ways, the leads that come in don't have a single clue of why they actually signed up or what the company or the product is about. So sales will necessarily disqualify a lot of those leads or basically not be able to sell them. So that is something you need to keep in mind when you measure conversion rate. And companies, or you can also make a decision. You say, I measure my conversion rate based on SQL to customer, which means sales qualified lead. Only if a sales agent actually qualified that lead and noted or recorded that this was a qualified lead, because they're part of our customer segment, they're part of our target group, they actually have a need, a problem that we can solve, they have an interest in the product, then we can take this as a measure and say my conversion rate is SQL to customer. But for most cases, you need to make ultimately a decision about how you measure it and then start benchmarking. So your conversion rate gives you now a sense of what is the strength of my narrative? What's the first impression like when people actually enter the world of my company? When they first hear about me, is the marketing messaging on top? Once they get to the sales agents, are the sales agents able to continue that narrative? Often that breaks down because marketing teams tend to be very secretive if they're incentivized by lead volume, because of course they would be criticized for what they are promoting, because sales teams, of course, what you are sending out there is not really helping me close the deal. And so they will also shield themselves from their criticism, and then often trying to avoid sales marketing coordination or synchronization meetings. I've seen this many times in practice, and too many times to ignore it. Like, you will find those dynamics, and they're not because people are unprofessional or don't care about their jobs. It's just the design of how things are set up in the revenue organization just leads to those outcomes. And this has nothing to do anymore with personality. That's just the design of the system, of how it has been set up. And so how can then the sales team create continuity to the narrative that the marketing team created when there's often a lack of transparency from the get-go? And so the conversion rate shows you a couple of those things. It also, of course, shows you the skill level. That's clear. It could be that sales agents are just not prepared to have conversations that actually lead to sales, to outcomes. That they lack skills in closing the deal. That they lack skills to actually ask for the payment information or ask the customer to buy. It could be that they just scare off customers because they're completely improvising. They don't have any structure. They don't have any skills really, and end up just leading with aggressive push tactics or very transactional selling, or just basically harassing the customer until some of them submit and say, "I just buy so that you leave me alone," or their phone numbers get blocked. And so conversion rate gives you some hints about what might be going on. The next one you want to look at is revenue per sales agent. Now, it might sound obvious, but a lot of companies actually have difficulties in tracking this. You also have to make decisions. Does revenue per sales agent include your refunds? Does it include does it only include revenue that actually went to the bank account? What if your product is something that is sold with a monthly subscription or in installments? Do you go for the total contract value? Do you go for the monthly recurring revenue? So there's some decisions that you have to make about how you define revenue per sales agent, but at least you have to have a unified logic behind it, which allows you to benchmark. And last but not least, of course, you want to look at the lead volume. If you have those four metrics, so lead volume per month overall for the market, if you have those four metrics, now you understand a bit more about the leverage points that you have. So if I have, let's say, 1,000 leads and I have a historical conversion rate of 10%, then I can probably ask for 12% in the next month, because I also assume that my training, my coaching, my investment in the sales team, of course, will now lead to an improved performance compared to the historical. And so with my 1,000 leads, right, that would give me 120 customers at a 12% conversion rate. So it means I can now already predict, or at least assume, make an assumption that I will have 120 customers next month based on historical performance and based on what I believe the sales team with that markup can achieve. Those 120 customers, if they have an average order value of, let's say, $100, they will translate for me into a revenue of $12,000. Now, this is an hypothetical example. Probably in a company, these numbers are way higher or lower, depending. But I can now already make an assumption about what my sales result will look like for the coming month based on understanding average order value, understanding average conversion rate, understanding average revenue per sales agent. Now I can also, of course, divide this total, these 12,000 by the either the amount of sales agents that I have, and that will tell me what their sales target should be per month, or I divide it by the average revenue per sales agent, which tells me how many salespeople I need. It depends on your unique situation, which approach to take here. And this is really a basic calculation. It's nothing sophisticated, but it is already one step further down and in terms of sophistication than just looking at the sales target per month, looking at the actual revenue and screaming, cancel everybody's holidays. I need people to be working until 10 p.m. at night. Like, this typically doesn't really drive the results. It can, of course, in the short term. Let's also be honest about it can in the short term, but it will erode the foundations of the sales function in the mid and long term for multiple reasons. And then you have, once you understand this, you also understand if I have average order value, conversion rate, and revenue per sales agent as my three main levers, marketing needs to be managed by the marketing department. And there's a different approach to this. One is, for example, giving bonuses only for SQL to customer, like incentivizing the marketing team actually for the performance of the sales team instead of just giving bonuses for high lead volumes. But once you have those three that are in control of the sales function, average order value, revenue per sales agent, and conversion rate, now the team leaders, if you have some, or the head of sales, now they can actually work specifically on driving those in a nuanced manner and have actually very specific and pragmatic initiatives for each of them. It's often the team leaders that drive the performance. Team leaders set the tone. Team leaders create the culture. If somebody joins your company as a sales agent, they do not think of your culture as what is happening in the HQ among the HR department, the C-level, and the finance team when they go to lunch or play ping pong with each other or watch a movie after work. That's not what they experience as culture. What they experience as culture is the immediate supervisor, their team leader, and the values, the character, the personality, the management style of that unique superior becomes their experience of your company. That's where culture is being driven. It's by those who look into the faces of their employees every single day on a department level, on a team level. And so the impact of a sales team leader cannot be underestimated in driving sales results. We often overlook that when we sit in the HQ, when we sit in the executive team, and we really just think about, let's pressure the country manager, let's pressure the head of sales, they need to hit their targets, the director of sales. But we very barely pay attention to the team leaders. Of course, it's not the job of the executive team to manage team leaders, but we need to be aware that this is where performance is actually created. And you can have a team of high performers who hate their daily work experience, and maybe you hired them from really prestigious companies and they were really successful in the past, but because of inadequate team leadership, their own team leader, they will leave your company, or they will underperform, or they will start sabotaging the sales results because they have a grudge. So you have to really keep this in mind. The sales performance is driven on an agent and team leader level. Now, let's go to the team leaders for a moment. Team leaders, like all leaders, mirror into their teams what is inside of them. If you have, for example, something I always warn about, a high performer that performed really well in your teams before, and somebody who was an individual contributor, who always smashed all sales records, who was always the person who stayed late nights, who skipped the public holidays, sacrificed their family, personal life. You're very proud of them because they always brought in the glory. And you said, I want to reward that person because I want to keep them in the company. So you say, I want to make them a team lead. Big mistake. If somebody can lead themselves to extremes and torture themselves to get results, it can be considered admirable for the results. I also understand there's a lot of pain involved. If they can do this, if they can manage themselves in such a manner, it doesn't qualify them at all to be leading a team of 10, 15 people and manage the emotions and the motivation of 15 other people. They might not even have the patience to even look into that. What often ends up happening then is that those high performers who are really good at managing their own results and going for their own success end up in leadership positions that they are first unprepared for, second untrained for, and third, they were not able to make a shift out of their individual contributor personality into a team leader personality. Now you need to make sure that everybody in your team shines. It's not anymore about yourself. It's about everybody else shining. It's about making champions out of others. If you're not prepared for this mentally, you will end up managing them like you manage yourself, by brute force. What? It's 9 p.m. Friday night. Why are you wanting to go home? I thought we are in this together. Are you not dedicated enough to the mission, to our sales targets? Why are you not working on the weekend? When I was in your position, I always worked on the weekend. And so the high performer leader then basically applies their own standard on everybody else, and just a recipe for disaster in most cases. And you find that then good people leave the team, right? Because what the high performers do is not setting a high standard. They're just basically crushing everybody else under their own lack of management skills and leadership skills. And so sometimes it's not the high performer that you want to insert and implant into a leadership role. Sometimes you can train them, prepare and coach high performers, of course, if they have what it takes. Sometimes it's more useful to actually create a secondary career path to reward the high performer, make them senior sales agent, make them sales expert, and give them that path, give them a higher fixed salary, give them more perks, make sure that they get the spotlight, that they get reward for who they are, that they get status, which is sometimes more important for them. They get status and belonging, that they can start leading in different ways, like leading, for example, workshops for new markets, sharing their best practices, having an elevated role in the organization. Sometimes it's way more gratifying for these types of profiles. So what's happening here on the sales agent level, in the team level, the dynamics between the leader and the team, that drives your performance, that drives your average order value, that drives your conversion rate and your revenue per sales agent. And next to that is your incentive structure, which is, do you incentivize, first of all, those three metrics, but also, do you look at refunds? Do you look at churn? Do you do clawback? Do you take commission back from people who have sold unethically if you can prove that they sold unethically? Do you have clear standards for if somebody violates those rules? What does your performance management process look like? Are people actually just getting performance reviews reactively once a year, where all of their flaws and mistakes are being pointed out, almost in a passive-aggressive manner, because none of it was ever mentioned before, and then once a year they get surprised by all the accumulated resentment of their leaders? Or do you have proactive performance reviews, check-ins on a quarterly basis, on a monthly basis, where the leader actually gets ahead of the problems and coaches? This is why you have leaders as well. Coaches makes adjustments in the behaviors of sales agents, helps them get up to the skill level where they need to be, giving them tactical advice and just being in the field with them, shadowing them, mentoring them, and helping them improve their performance across all those different metrics, those three metrics particularly. And so you will always end up in a situation where you have to take a nuanced, systemic approach to your sales team, and you need to really work on different levels, on the psychological level of your teams, on your leadership level, on your team leader level, also sometimes on the head of sales or basically leader of the sales functions themselves. It's also important to look into their worldview. Like, are they just driving short-term results and with no regard for the consequences? Because if they do, you might celebrate them in the short term, but you will run into great performance issues with them in the mid and the long term, because customers read reviews. And if the sales approach is unethical, if it's pushy, if it's transactional, if it's unbearable for the market, then that will hurt the results over the mid and the long term. And so you want to be very careful to look into all of these different factors. Managing a sales organization or building a sales function, right, takes more than just pushing people to perform, especially if you talk about B2C, if you talk about high volume, if you talk about busy running teams, running a complex operation. You need to look into, what are my incentives? What are my leadership structures? What are the worldviews of those who are actually in charge? Are they aligned with the long-term values? How do I incentivize them really? Do I actually incentivize their worst behaviors? Or do I incentivize them, and do I design the game in such a way that the way they operate leads to long-term success? Who do I promote? Based on what do I promote people? How do I reward high performance? How do I get ahead of problems on the performance level? And many of those circumstances, you will find if you pay attention to them, you will have way more control and you will be able to pull the right strategic levers and identify also what real root causes are of drops or decline in your sales performance. And sometimes that's something you cannot even capture in a spreadsheet because it's a market motion, it's a competitor move, it's something that's completely outside of your control. But if you, at least as a first step, have an internal map of reality of what's going on in your sales organization and sales function, you will be having a way stronger foundation to also have a very clear map of reality of the outside world. You will have the bandwidth to do that. I've seen so many times in companies are messy, chaotic, and all over the place that their biggest threat actually becomes they're so busy with themselves, they're so introspective because they haven't figured out just their internal operations that they completely lose track of the market, that they completely become ignorant of what's happening around them, that they miss the opportunities, they miss the risk, they miss the competitor moves, they miss the regulatory changes until it's too late, and then they are forced into reactivity and firefighting mode. So to get ahead of this, look at the nuances in your sales function, look at it from different angles, look at the people in the organization, in the sales function, look at the incentive structures, and look also beyond just monthly targets and their achievement, but look into what actually drives those targets. And that includes how your marketing team is performing. Sales is a consequence of many things working together, including product, including marketing. Like sales is a consequence of an ecosystem that works in conjunction. It should not be seen as a silo. Neither should be marketing, product, or any other of those. They need to start thinking with a shared mission and work towards a shared goal, a shared direction. And it really starts with who the people are that run it and how they are incentivized and how you design that system.